I'm Stephanie Greene, and we're here today to talk about the Brattleboro Words Project book, Print Town, Brattleboro's Legacy of Words. The purpose of each of these short videos is to unpack one of the many interesting features of the book and our history. I'm here today with Rolf Parker-Houghton, the historian who wrote the chapter on T.P. James, infamous local printer, author, publisher, editor, and spirit pen of Charles Dickens. Rolf, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you.
When and how do we first hear of T.P. James?
Well, it's pretty amazing. We first hear of T.P. James. He's first referred to as the mysterious Mr. A in an article by a special correspondent to the Springfield Union newspaper. And excerpts, that was published in July of 1873. And then excerpts, lengthy excerpts from that paper were published in the Vermont Record and Farmer in August, right here in Brattleboro in 1873.
Okay, and just to clarify, what did T.P. James claim to have done?
Well, beautifully, initially he didn't claim to have done anything. The special correspondent claimed that there was a somewhat literate mechanic in town, or perhaps a printer, who supposedly was at a seance that he had to be pressured into going to by his landlady on Oak Street, and that at the first seance, the table waltzed around the room and landed in his lap, and at the second seance, T.P. James, it is reported in the Springfield Union, went into a trance and wrote, scribbled on paper. And when he looked at it, it said that Charles Dickens' spirit, and Charles Dickens had died several years previously, wanted to have a private conversation with T.P. James. And in subsequent conversations, T.P. James was supposedly told that Dickens chose him to finish Edwin Drood. And Edwin Drood is this mystery, it's a murder mystery. Everybody wants to know the ending of it, and Dickens goes and dies before he finishes writing the novel. So everybody is just left. The ultimate cliffhanger, right? Charles Dickens dead, it's no hope. Except there's hope, because T.P. James is given this opportunity by Charles Dickens, supposedly, to complete the novel, and supposedly Dickens also tells him that he doesn't have to share the proceeds with anybody. It's fine if he makes money off it himself.
Good for him. And when did the book come out?
It came out on October 31st of the same year, 1873. It was published by James, and it was printed by the Clark W. Bryant Company in Springfield. And this actually is what made a lot of people scratch their heads, actually more than scratch their heads, because as T.P. James had worked as a printer for many newspapers all across New England, and editors from those papers, when they learned that T.P. James was the mysterious Mr. A, they were like, oh, wait a second, because they put one and one together. The Clark W. Bryant Company, which was printing his book, also was the owner of the Springfield Union. So whoever printed his book had business dealings with T.P. James. Thus, it appeared to these editors to be a shrewd advertising dodge. And most historians, including Andrew Cull, who wrote for Vermont Life, they pointed out that it looks most likely that T.P. James was the special correspondent who discovered himself in a beautiful example of marketing.
Yeah.
So there you have it.
Well, he seems to have been a master at controlling his own press. Did the book sell well?
T.P. James, we have to take it with a grain of salt. T.P. James claimed it sold 30,000 copies. But we don't know that, but we do know that this book can be found in libraries all across the United States. It was described in its day as a sensation, was described to be selling very well. This is because spiritualism, which was the belief that it was easy for people to speak with spirits of the dead if you had a medium, was very popular. And it was just such a sensational claim that it was bound to attract attention. As the New York Times, I can only paraphrase, but the New York Times review of the book said, we entirely believe Mr. James in as far as the origins of this novel go, but it's just a pity that you lose all your ability to write. You lose all your talent once you die. So, yeah.
Wow. So did James go on to channel more Dickens?
Well, he actually, interestingly, claimed in the foreword to his version of Edward Drood that Dickens had told him that he could count on him coming to help James write the life and adventures of Bockley Wickleheap and also the Hunchback's Pilgrimage. And James started another magazine where he put installments of both of these novels. We don't know, we only have one copy of this magazine. We don't know how many installments he made or whether he finished these novels or not, unfortunately.
And were these novels that Dickens had in the works?
Or
did
I think James... the odds are basically zero.
Okay, yeah. Very good.
Yeah.
And what was the name of this, the name and the meaning of the name?
Oh, the Summerland Messenger was the name of the magazine. And Summerland was what spiritualists, the word they used to refer to heaven, or the afterlife at least. Okay. So it was a magazine. It had literary, it had novels and that James wrote, and on top of that, it also had communications with other spirits. There was a man, an explorer named Kane, who was an Arctic explorer, and James wrote or printed that Kane conveyed that in reality that in the center of the Arctic was a very nice little tropical spot. So that was a little tidbits like that you could also
interesting. So when did James start the Independent?
The Independent was a newspaper that James started just before he left Brattleboro. He first became the editor, co-editor, and publisher with Charles Davenport of the Windham County Reformer, but around 1879, I think the Independent came out, and that's after James had a split with Davenport. The Independent was described as being spicy and saucy, and also was described as attacking his former partner, C.N. Davenport. So they had some type of split, and then James, shortly after that, leaves town with Lizzie Plummer, who was an heiress of the Salisbury printing family in Brattleboro.
And this was Lizzie was wife number 4?
Wife number 4. He didn't bother divorcing any of his wives. He married another one instead, and then his wives would have to sue him for abandonment or adultery or those types of things. The last dealings in Brattleboro that we have, he and Lizzie Plummer sell the brick house that she owned, that she'd inherited, that was on Main Street. But her money was his money because of the unfair laws in Vermont at that time around women and property. She didn't own it, so it would have been his money. And not that long afterwards, they divorced. So that probably didn't work out well for her.
Okay. So how do you sum this up? I guess it's easy to laugh at James, but...
Yeah, I mean, he'd be so audacious, but at the same time, how many of us would try to write hundreds of pages of a Dickens novel? I mean, one, there's just the boldness of it, right? The brave, I mean, that's, wow, chutzpah, Yeah. But on top of that, I mean, he wrote hundreds of pages and completed a Dickens novel. Now, it's not as good. There are some people have pointed out plot problems and whatnot. But it was a monumental task, and he did tackle it. So
Pretty good. Thank you so much, Rolf. This has been
thank you very much.
fascinating. All right,
Very
take
good.
care.
Take care.
Bye.